This morning, we're talking about the power of speaking out about sexual misconduct. Right now, national headlines flooded with accusations about powerful people taking advantage of others. These activities that were once shameful whispers in the shadows are now coming to light. But what about right here in the Midlands? The accusations just don't come out of Hollywood studios or political offices. It happens everywhere, school, home, or even the streets. Many people, women and men, might have a story to tell and even want to report it to the authorities, but they don't know where to start. And that's why this morning on Good Day Columbia, we're having a community roundtable to talk about this intense and emotional subject. In just a few minutes, we'll have a panel of experts live in the studio, ready to answer your questions. Make sure you stay tuned because after the break, we're helping victims speak out. That's a Good Day Columbia. Time now is 7:37, and right now we're holding our roundtable discussion, the power of speaking out as it relates to sexual assault. And we have our panelists who are ready to take on and tackle this issue. We have Dr. Markeisha Miller, licensed psychotherapist. He's standing by with us here. No stranger to the show here on Good Day Columbia, Dr. Markeisha Miller.
Thank you.
Casey Singletary, Sexual Trauma Services of the Midlands. Casey, thank you for being here. And Joseph Dickey Law Group. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We're going to get straight to it. You know, this has been a massive topic in headlines recently, from Bill Cosby to Harvey Weinstein. And now just most recently the allegations against Supreme Court nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh. And Casey, we'll start off with you. We're hearing so many words now. We're hearing sexual assault, we're hearing sexual misconduct, we're hearing inappropriate. What's the difference and how can we identify?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a lot of vague terminology that's used when we talk about sex in general, specifically like sexual assault, sexual harassment. So I think those are umbrella terms that can mean a lot of different things. Obviously, inappropriate behavior can include things that don't constitute sexual harassment or sexual assault. But when we're really thinking about sexual assault, it can mean instances of rape, but not all forms of sexual assault are rape. It can involve inappropriate touching, forcing someone to view or post for pornographic material, all of these things without the individual's consent or when they weren't able to give consent. And so that becomes a big part of the conversation. So really understanding what it is that we're talking about when we have these conversations.
And basically that person, you talked about the consent portion with someone's kind of like, I guess either you using their power or to let someone, to make somebody do something.
Right, so there could be instances of coercion, whether they're intimidating, they're pressuring them, taking advantage of someone who is intoxicated, whether that person willingly chose to consume alcohol or drugs, or whether they were forced to consume those things, or using their position of power to compel that person to participate in something that we know they don't want to participate in. So with consent, it's about freely choosing to participate in a specific activity when that activity is taking place.
Dr. Markeisha Miller, for many victims, the trauma goes to the core of who they are.
Yes, it does. And, you know, to say that it's such a traumatic piece, and people experience so many emotions. We're talking about shame, blame, anger, and people live with this years after. So it's such a healing process. And so it does, you know, even years after, individuals are still trying to find that healing place from such a traumatic experience.
Joseph Dickey, you're with the Dickey Law Group. You know, what's the legal standpoint for someone for pursuing a sexual misconduct case? They may feel as if no one's going to believe me, but I need to pursue a case because this was very traumatic.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to what Ms. Singletary is talking about. You know, what are the differences between the sexual misconduct and whether it's sexual harassment or sexual assault? Looking at conduct that's unwelcome or whether it's voluntary but coerced. You know, if you feel that way subjectively, you need to start reporting that conduct, whether you're in the workplace, reporting that to a supervisor. If your supervisor is the person that is harassing you or assaulting you, report it outside HR. You can go to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the South Carolina Human Affairs Commission, or just contact a local lawyer like myself. And we can help you, guide you through the process in pursuing any claim or trying to get your concerns out there.
And you know, that's a good segue to the next question here. Dr. Miller, for many victims, they might be hearing And people may say things like, well, why did she wait so long? Or why did he wait so long? Why didn't you say something before? Because with sexual assault, we're talking about both male and females can both be victims.
Absolutely. And I always love to make sure that we don't make these situations gender-based, because it happens on both sides. And I'm glad you say that. And the way that I typically compare this is it's kind of like a grief process. You know, many times when people are grieving, sometimes you hear these, gosh, why can't they just get over it? Why are they still carrying on with this? But what we have to understand is that when an individual is healing from a sexual assault, it is a process. And what we know about a process is that people move through it in a different way. It takes a lot of courage just for that individual to open their mouth and say, this happened to me. And so getting there takes time. And then once they get there, it's still a healing piece, because now we have to work through it. And then once they work through it, it still moves through those various emotions of shame and blame and all of these different episodes. And so we have to understand that individuals take this at a different pace. But I think the most important things to understand is that courage to even come forward. Many people aren't believed. You know, many people feel shame. They feel that people are going to point the fingers. And we've actually seen that in a lot of media, you know, so.
Absolutely. We have to go to a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to come back with Casey Singletary with Sexual Trauma Services of the Midlands. We're going to talk about, kind of piggyback off of what Dr. Miller talked about, that confidence piece. Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back after this.
What you need to know as you're heading out for your day today: 9 a.m. going to be heating up to 73 and all the way up to 83 by 11 a.m. Going to work to burn off any patchy fog that might still be in the area as we heat up to a high of 90 degrees today. Staying mostly sunny with those above average temperatures. But coming up in my full forecast, I'll be talking about the cool down that's ahead, humidity that's going to continue to increase, and the possibility for a wet weekend.
When it comes to your morning commute, overall things are moving fairly smoothly around the Columbia Metro, especially in the northeastern side of town. The northwestern side of town, you're definitely going to want to go giving yourself some additional time to get to your destination, especially traveling along I-26 and I-20. Be aware that we have a left lane closure along I-26 westbound over by Broad River Road in Irmo, exit 97 for an accident involving injuries, and it's getting really backed up in the area. I'll have another update for you in just a few minutes.
Welcome back to our community roundtable, the power of speaking out as it relates to sexual assault. And before the break, Dr. Markeisha Miller talking about the confidence for individuals who've been traumatized by this to come out and speak out. And Casey Singletary, Sexual Trauma Services of the Midlands, you deal with a lot of individuals who have to have the courage to stand up. What are you finding?
So what we see a lot is that a lot of the myths surrounding sexual assault in terms of how it's perpetrated really impact victims themselves. So a lot of the information we have is that it's going to be a stranger assault, or it's that the victim is going to behave in particular ways. What we see is that sometimes, or most of the time, perpetrators are known to the victim, and they will prey on vulnerabilities like intoxication, like youth, like homelessness. And so the perpetrator will use those vulnerabilities to shame the victim. And so when we know this as a society, the victim will do that to themselves, and that really makes it difficult for them to come forward. So when we see individuals coming forward, they're already replaying those ideas in their head. And so it's very important to, when people speak out, to acknowledge that it wasn't their fault, acknowledge the courage that it took for them to come forward, because that really determines whether they're going to continue to seek therapy or go to the criminal justice system to find that help that they need.
You know, Casey, one point that you all made too as well, talking about unwanted advances, and many times we're hearing kind of like a victim blaming sometimes, where what did she was wearing this, or he looked at me in this way, or it was the drink, or this and that. And do you see that causes a lot of people to just like don't say a word at all?
Absolutely, and a lot of those we call those risk reduction strategies. It's what we're all taught in terms of how we prevent sexual assault, but they're really ineffective. It's focusing on women as victims, strangers as perpetrators, and it doesn't acknowledge that men are experiencing sexual assault and children also experience sexual assault. And so all of those myths, those risk reduction techniques, while they may be helpful in just general safety in some regard, they're not really effective in preventing sexual assault, but they are used for victim blaming.
Gotcha.
Can I interject?
Absolutely.
Just to piggyback on that, that. Those type of techniques are also used civilly for employers that try to defend against their employees that have committed sexual assault or sexual harassment. And just people need to know that that shouldn't prevent you from trying to pursue a claim or report your sexual assault or your sexual harassment. What you're wearing at work should not matter. You still are protected and have a right not to be harassed sexually.
You know, speaking about that, what could be the legal ramifications? Because let's look at another one side. You may have some people who come forward and has a false accusation. So if someone comes up and say, Friendy did this and Friendy did that, but it was false, what are the legal ramifications?
Well, you know, not that those happen often, but when they do, you know, people that make those false reports can be subject to some criminal liability. You know, there was a recent case, I think somewhere in the nation, where a guy was, where a woman made a report and a guy got in trouble, and she now that it's come out, the truth came out, she's now getting going through the criminal justice system. But there also can be defamation and civil liability as well that attach to it.
But Casey, what do you find a lot with that? Because false reports, it's not common.
Correct. So what we see is that when there are instances of false reports, that's what gets a lot of attention. According to FBI statistics, it's approximately 2 to 8% of reports are considered false.
Out of like 100?
Out of 100%, 2 to 8%. And that's comparable to other false reports for violent crimes. And that also includes cases that could be unfounded. There's no real standardization for determining what's a false report. And so there could just be a situation where we can't prove that an assault happened, so it's classified as unfounded, which will be included in those statistics. So it's just, again, a lot of misinformation around sexual assault, and then that contributes to the idea that a lot more allegations are false when that's really not the case. We
have to go to a commercial break. When we come back, Dr. Markeisha Miller, we're going to have a question for you, and then we're going to start taking some questions as well. We understand that we do have some people that want to speak out as well. Stay with us. There's more Good Day Columbia coming up after the break. Good day, Columbia, and thank you so much for joining us for our community roundtable, The Power of Speaking Out. Our panelists have been here for the last 30 minutes, and we're tackling the issue about speaking out as it relates to a sexual assault. Dr. Markeisha Miller, we left off with Casey Singletary, going to Dr. Markeisha Miller from the standpoint about, Dr. Miller, when different people come to you or different individuals begin to open up, what are you hearing, and how does someone navigate to go into the core of the issue?
The very first thing that I often hear is uncertainty. And that uncertainty is based upon the fact of, I think this happened to me, but I need someone to validate it for me. And so that is often the very first piece that comes. And then there's this slew of emotions that come into play. And as I stated, I think that the emotions are very much similar to what we see with the grief process, where there is a sense of denial. I have worked with men and women who were in a denial piece of, I don't think this happened to me, because if I say that it happened to me, what does that say about me? And so I faced that with many individuals that I've worked with. And so I think it's just a range of emotions that go from denial finally to accepting, and getting to that accepting place, and then moving to action.
Wow, we have to have our closing remarks. We'll start off with you, Casey Singletary, Sexual Trauma Services of the Midlands. Your closing remarks.
I really like to focus on prevention. That's what I do at work, and I really think that if we shift our focus to prevention, still supporting survivors, but just understanding what true prevention means, which is really teaching young people, we start at age 3, how to engage in healthy relationships. Because if we focus on the healthy piece, we're not going to have sexual and dating violence within healthy relationships. And it can start very easy, very simply, and we have a lot of resources for parents, schools, faith, communities of faith to really help with that process. A lot of programming that really teaches youth those skills so that we can end sexual violence from happening in our community.
Wow. So how can they get access to that?
They can call our office. We have a 24-hour hotline, 803-771-7273, or they can go to our website at stsm.org.
Wow, thank you so much for that. Casey Singletary, Sexual Trauma Services of the Midlands. Joseph Dickey with the Dickey Law Group. Your closing remarks as it relates to sexual assault.
I just want to say it's important that people know that they have a right to be free from sexual assault and sexual harassment, and it's important to act, because legally you do have deadlines or statute of limitations that you must report claims for. You have 180 days to report a sexual harassment with your job with the Human Affairs Commission, and there are other various deadlines. But so it's just important to act, to seek counsel from sexual trauma, Dr. Miller, attorney like myself, or any other attorney. But it's just important to act and speak up and protect yourself.
Dr. Markeisha Miller, licensed psychotherapist. Obviously, you hear a lot, and people open up.
Yes.
A lot. Your final remarks.
The power of the voice. That's where I'm going to begin and end it.
Yeah.
It's so important to have that ability to speak out, but the power of that voice is not just a healing piece for that individual who's actually speaking out, but it also gives encouragement for others to speak out as well. And so that shows the power that there is in an individual coming forward and being able to find that healing place.
Wow. Dr. Markeisha Miller, licensed psychotherapist. Once again, Joseph Dickey, the Dickey Law Group, and Casey Singletary, Sexual Trauma Services of the Midlands. Thank you so much for coming this morning. We appreciate it. And we know that individuals who are watching were definitely educated by what you all had to offer. So thank you again. Well, that's all the time we have for today's Community Roundtable, but head on over to our Watch Fox Facebook page and we will go live and answer some of those questions that you have. So make sure you stay tuned. There's more Good Day Columbia coming up. Your only local news at 8 o'clock, including the latest developments in Florence right now. 7 law officers shot, 1 dead. Arlena Pringle is live with an update. Stay with us.